I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting, and we'll start with comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to any amendments, David, to the agenda.
No amendments tonight.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to announcements.
So it's quiet here tonight, but there's a lot of activity going on. I just wanted to highlight a few things. I don't have anything in front of you on announcements. I'm just going to give you a brief little update. Obviously, we're at the beginning of the school year, and our students are in our buildings, and we're happy for that. Again, it's been a really positive beginning. Convocation, our profession development that's happened in all of our schools, open house first day, have all been really, really positive. We've gotten some really, really positive feedback from our employees, all staff, and I think we're moving ahead really, really well. I think it's safe to say that we have some continuing construction. We're going to hear about some of those updates. Obviously, here at the middle school, you're aware of the elevator project and how we're working through that with families and students as they come in and out of the school. In addition, obviously, we've had a recent, yesterday was also a challenging first day, with also it being a voting day. And again, staff and community members were really, really responsive for our employees parking in different locations to allow for easier access. I will tell you that we've gotten some really positive feedback. Being the first day of school, a lot of the folks that were in and around the school buildings really felt like, wow, this is quite something. There was a lot of community interface. Parents and guardians were dropping off, having really nice exchanges, and that was really quite a benefit, actually, of having it on the same day. I was over at Chamberlain during some of those times, and there was an awful lot of appreciation and just understanding of kind of those first days, bringing people back, I will say. And obviously, an outcome of that was also we're happy to say we have a new legislator likely to be moving forward, probably. But we know that you're on the ballot, and we recognize that as well. One other thing we need to talk about is the October 1st board meeting, which is also a VSBA regional meeting. And so it's not as easy as just a quick reschedule. This also gets into some holiday time frames if we reschedule that. So the October 9th through the 10th is really, we have some Jewish holiday in there. We probably could do something in the latter part of that week, around the 15th, 12th through the 15th of October. So I don't know what you want to do. That's our regional meeting at Milton. Mm-hmm. So to go to anywhere else would be different. So I'm happy to work with board members on trying to move that date, or perhaps we forego that date. That's easier said than done, but
Can't we move it to a different day, like the Thursday, the 2nd of October, or does that not work?
Well, that's right now. You could do that.
So
you
wait, right now it's the 1st?
The 1st, which is a conflict, so that would be Thursday the 2nd, which is a proposed. And I don't know. Yeah, so we get into holiday, begins on Wednesday the 8th of October, and will run essentially through the 15th. So that's often not easy for people to get to if that's happening there. So again, but I don't know what you'd like to do. That's, again, announcements, and we don't necessarily need to make a decision now, but.
I do think most of us want to attend the regional meeting, so I think we are saying the meeting on the 1st needs to be rescheduled. Okay,
so we'll definitely do that, and we'll figure out where we go from there. I will next time report out just kind of an enrollment update for you on our September meeting. But again, things are positive. We're in a plus category across the district. We've had a really increased kindergarten enrollment, particularly we knew at the kindergarten level, but we're also creeping up. We're getting closer now. We're into the 70s and creeping higher. So we estimated at 55, and we're well above that. Also, kind of to note is just our freshman incoming class. predominantly from the islands has been an uptick of about 41 students. So that's been pretty consistent. And I'll have something for you in a report in our next one. A quick example, again, Stuart and his group when around professional development done a really nice job. We have we have all of our professional development, but the high school was one here, just kind of how to move forward in the year. So their connection was, taking off on Rebel Air was kind of a neat connection, and kind of the mid-flight adjustments to the takeoff to maintaining, etc. was a nice play, but an awful lot of work that went on to connect what I would say the message and our work as administrative staff, our direction and focus for the upcoming, all was embedded in each and every school. So I feel good about that. And again, just a lot of positive energy in and around the buildings, also with our community folks around as well. So that's it.
Good. All right. I know we don't have our student representative on the agenda yet.
I know.
We will recommend that for the next agenda. But if there's anything there you'd like to update the board on, I'll just open it up to you.
This is the beginning of school.
Yeah.
I know I'm a slam leader, so we had our slam camp, and everything's going really well with that. The freshmen seem to be coming to the school really well. Also, our new athletic director, Mr. Hockenberry, is also getting settled in, and his office looks awesome. His new office. Fall sports are starting, and as well as the fall play, which is Bring It On this year, and the musical. And those auditions are going to be next week, so everything's just kind of coming together. And I think lastly, their next Thursday is the activities fair at our school, and previously it's been just freshmen and sophomore for sophomores, and this year it's for the whole school, which I think is really awesome because you could join a club when you're a senior too, and so we can get the opportunity to do that. I think that's it.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6, city-school collaboration.
So I'll meld these both together, city-school collaboration and master planning and visioning. We, again, have continued to meet, although most recently Elizabeth, myself, Pam, and Kevin have not had the opportunity to really reconnect since our last.
Mm-hmm.
I've met with Kevin on a couple different occasions, and we're in the process of trying to put the final touches on kind of the plan around master planning and visioning and the support structures that are needed. I'll just kind of name a few of the areas, obviously. I think the board's well aware that we're working on appraisals for all of our facilities, particularly right now, the 3 elementaries. I've gotten one back currently. We are working with the master planning and visioning individual on the timeline. We're kind of retweaking that. You'll get a chance to see that at the next meeting to kind of vet that through. We're working to come up, I don't know what the exact name would be, but at the advisory committee of the master planning and visioning work. So we envision that to be folks from obviously school community, city, and some student and teacher representation on that advisory. We're working on our agreement between the master planning work. Obviously the scope of that work has changed pretty considerably from the receipt of some of the more recent proposal on the property at Rick Marcotte. We have worked, John and I, on getting some additional resources for some financial analyst type of work, and so we're happy that we have the person on board and going to start some work with her right off. Also, I think part of this is being really clear about the cost breakdown between city and school, so Kevin and I are really mindful of that. If we need to understand and make sure that you're clear about what that breakdown is. Our demographic analysis, again, these are kind of sub-tabs of the work. Those of you who know Bill Smith had been doing a lot of our demographic work for years, has now retired. We do need to celebrate some of his work, although I know most of you probably don't know him as well, but he's done work for the district for years, as well as the entire Chittenden County and beyond group. So we don't have him, so we're working with another individual to get that information. And then we're also kind of a sub-tab is the 3D modeling. We do know that, in order for community members to really understand the impact of the city center, you kind of really need to know what does it look like. And, lacking kind of the building footprint of it, but can we have visual 3D modeling that helps people to understand what that means, so it brings them into the conversation. And there's also been some, an inclusion of this is about the kind of the business association within the South Burlington area. And there's been a considerable movement now around having a South Burlington Business Association that's beginning to form. So again, just being mindful of their role and activity and play within our work. So that's really the update to date. We've got a lot of things now coming together, and wanting to really be clear with both board, council, and community about where we are and where we're going with the master planning work. So I don't know if there's any particular questions that the board has of me at this point regarding this work.
I do want to make sure we get our meetings with Kevin and Pam back on the calendar.
Yeah, and I'm working with Kevin. I did meet with him and tried to pin down one. I think we'll have that, as well as a steering committee meeting, which will be part of the, the timeline here factored into the work. Obviously, we need to have it by our charter, but also it ought to be integrated with kind of master planning and visioning.
Did we
work.
have a date set for a steering committee?
We do not.
Okay.
No. So that's also the other part of the need.
So the master plan, that you're hiring, the city and the school are jointly hiring somebody to guide the process. That's what I understand.
Right.
Is there an RFP that's gone out already?
We did
Is there a
not.
draft
We did
RFP
not.
Or?
Nope, we did not do it that way. And again, we 8 years ago used the same firm, D. Young Walker, and because a lot of the information that they have all of the boilerplate information, and so we chose to stay with the same firm based on kind of the efficiencies of that.
Well, is there then a different kind of document that kind of lays out what their mission is? Something that we can see that is guiding this process.
That's right. That's very much connected to kind of the plan and the cost breakdown. I mean, I want to be really clear. I mean, I intend to be around, but if Kevin and I went away, there should be some concrete information about what are the expectations. Now, we're going to probably have to challenge ourselves around what that cost breakdown is. Is it 2/3, 1/3 city school based on certain categories? Obviously, we're getting appraisals. We probably would pay for the majority of that, but there's a compelling interest on behalf of the city to do this work, jointly. And so Kevin certainly is in agreement with that.
So when would we be at the point where we could see the kind of the mission, the objectives, and the cost structure?
Yeah, I'm hopeful to have that to you again in part, probably not complete by the next board meeting, but some of the bigger pieces of the puzzle.
So next Wednesday?
Part of it, I think, next Wednesday you'll see. Again, part of this is dependent on Kevin too working with me, so I don't want to promise something of him that he can't deliver. So, but everything has been very positive, and working through the various issues. So I feel like we're on a positive path.
David, just getting back to the appraisals of the 3 elementary schools, you said that one had come back. How can we access that information and take a look at those?
Yep, it becomes a public document. I intend to provide it to the board. I just got it actually yesterday, so I wanted to kind of peruse it and look at it, and understand it a little bit more thoroughly. It's very, very comprehensive, and I feel like it's so far so good.
Is that a public document?
Well, I think depends on our particular activity, right? And that's part of the reason for me hold right now. I've got some questions out there. I believe it is, because it's part of the master planning and visioning process. If it was simply just in a sale, how do we withhold that? How do we, that's part of the equation of master planning and visioning, is the understanding all the cost implications and your wants and needs. So I've got a question in right now, to try to figure that out. And as I said earlier, we have some help with our financial analyst type of work around the work that Dan and Chris Shaw, John and Tom are doing around looking at kind of the cost-benefit analysis around the stewardship plan and CIP plan. That obviously has a factor connected into this work as well. So
just one other question. We are appraising what the value of our current elementary schools are right now. Is part of this process determining what a new facility costs these days to construct. I'm not saying we're there, but that would be part of a question potentially
Correct.
down the road.
So what would be the full replacement or replacement cost just for that building? That is part of the equation for
Right.
sure.
Okay.
Which is far different than what's that building that contains those grades worth.
Right, okay, all right. Yeah.
Also, somehow I had in my head, David, that we were appraising all of our properties, not
Well,
just
I do,
the-
right, I'll tell you right now, I have an appraisal for all three right now, and I've also asked for two, the other two, the high school and the middle school.
Thank
I'm
you.
wanting to be mindful of cost as well, but I do think it's going to be really important for us to have all of that
the master
information
plan,
so that we don't get, if this is true, we get far down in the process and we say, it would be good to know, and I don't have that. So there is some money here around these appraisals, and so I'm trying to be mindful of what am I getting before we push that next button.
Okay.
So anyway, I know that's a lot of information, lots happening fast, but again, my hope is to keep this really organized, and basically what I outlined is essentially will be tabs of the master planning and visioning document that will help inform people about the process.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, high school windows.
So I'm not going to talk much about this, both John and we have Tom here from Cardinal ATC, who's been really influential in helping us and answering questions. I do want to say that generally to the public, anytime we touch anything, we go through a process, that evaluates, any potential harm that might be to staff, student, or community. And I think we've demonstrated with consistency, whether we're floor tiles or ceiling or, into CMU block or anything of that, we have been very diligent about our work. I will tell you that it's somewhat frustrating. Every time frustrating but important, every time we touch something, we generally uncover additional information. Obviously, our buildings were built some time ago, and we are becoming more and more knowledgeable about what's within some of the product that was used. And here's an example that we're going to walk you through as a board, and obviously it's aired to the public, and we want to be very, very informative. We've had the opportunity to talk with staff, and run them through questions. We've sent out information to parents. We've welcomed them to this meeting. We'll continue to do so, and we again want to be really, forthcoming and transparent with our process. So without further ado, we've got both John, who's been instrumental as well in this work, and Tom, and last name Tom Baroido. And Tom is a SB grad. He's probably didn't want me to say when, but 1974. All right. But we're happy to have you helping us out with this.
4 years.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
If you hit this button down here, I think that'll make it.
Okay. Yeah, let me get out of
Did that do it? That's okay. We can leave those on the side. So, the school was undertaking a window replacement project, and as part of that work, in addition to looking into the new windows and the construction aspects of replacing windows, what's commonly done as part of their due diligence is to make sure that there's no hazardous materials associated with the project. So we were brought in to do some testing, and we tested the window caulking and glazing for asbestos and PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. And if you go to the next slide. So we were doing this testing, and what we found is that there were PCBs in the window glazing, and the window caulking had lower levels of PCBs and asbestos. So a couple things. First of all, it's only on the outside of the windows, not on the inside. And just for a visual, the glazing is the material that's between the glass and the metal frame, and the caulking is the material that's between the metal frame and the building. So we found this, and the next step is to evaluate it. If you go to the next slide, John. By way of background, PCBs were widely used from the 1940s or so up until 1979. You've probably heard about them in electrical transformers, the big transformers hanging from power poles and so forth, in the oils, because they do not conduct electricity and they're used for cooling. But it was also used in other items because it adds flexibility, plasticity to caulkings and paints and glazings and so forth. So it was used as an additive for those materials. And different mixtures of PCBs, there we go, were used for different products. There was a ban, as I mentioned, in 1979 because of concern about health effects and also how it accumulates in the environment. It accumulates up the food chain, and it should be noted that there's still low levels of PCBs, even though it's been banned since 1979, that is present in our soils, in the air, and in our food. So as far as South Burlington High School goes, after we found out that there were PCBs, we went on and did some additional testing. The first thing is, this is regulated by the US EPA. So the fact that now you know you have this in your building, you're required to do something about it. You're not required to test routinely. In other words, there's no requirement that the school district go and test all the buildings for PCBs. But once you do test, then you need to do something. And the reason why you do test, because if you dispose of it improperly, that's a violation of the federal rule. So that's why we test it. And once you find it's there, the first thing you need to find out is, has it leached to the surrounding building materials? Because if it has, you need to address those. And we did that testing, and it has not. The next thing was to concern about exposure to students and staff inside the school. So we tested the air inside the school, and as you can see, most of the samples were below the detection limit. We didn't detect anything. 2 of the samples we detected something, but it was lower than the lowest level that EPA has set for public health in schools. And that lowest level is actually set for 1 to 2-year-olds. So, and they go up with age. So very, very low levels in 2 of the samples. Then the next question was the dust inside the school, if it was carried in on the dust. So we did samples of the inside window wells. Again, 9 of the 11 samples, we didn't find anything. And on 2 of the samples, we detected very low levels. And we had a response to that, you'll see in a minute. And then also the gardens.
The Rebel Roots Garden.
The Rebel Roots Garden, right. Farm to Table garden program is close to the edge of the building. So potentially material could have fallen off the school and fallen into the garden. So we tested the soil in the garden, and all those samples were non-detect for PCBs also. So that's all good news. The chance of exposure is very low. Next slide. So the fact that there's PCBs in the windows kind of throws a wrench in the window project, because you need to now have a plan that when you take out the old windows, you do it properly so you don't create a lot of dust and spread this stuff inside the school, and you also have to dispose of it properly, and obviously it costs more. So, so that put off the first phase of the window project, and we need to rethink how it's going to go out to bid and how to handle the PCBs and determine the cost differential so that John can plan in the future how much this project's going to cost and phase it accordingly. So in order to control things in the interim, the school and Cardinal ATC took these steps. First thing we did is to walk around the outside of the building, both one of our staff and your staff, Bart, from facilities, and we did find there were small amounts of some glazing that had fallen, and those were collected. So it was to evaluate the condition of what was there and to collect any pieces that had fallen. The next step was to train the school maintenance staff so they were aware of what was going on, because the school maintenance staff, together with an outside contractor, undertook stabilization of the caulking and glazing. And what they did is to take silicone caulk and put a bead of caulk over the material so no more of it would come loose. So that was a joint effort between those two, and both of those, both the in-house staff and the outside contractor, were trained on how to do that. And then, because although there were very low levels, we did find something in the dust on the windowsills. We did a precautionary cleaning. School staff that was trained did precautionary cleaning of those windowsills. Just to give you an idea, John, next slide, on the timeline of this, you know, how long this has been going on. We were first involved in April, where we did the sampling of the material, and then again, you can just read down through there. Over the course of the summer, did the exterior sampling, the interior sampling, the air, the inspection, and so forth, right down through to just before school started, getting things sealed up and clean. And the next step is we're going to put together a plan, a specification that can go out to bid to do the removal phase of the window, and probably provide a couple different options so that this district can get different ways to approach it, and then make a decision based on those costs going forward.
Tom, could you go over just a little bit on the sealing and the glazing? Because I think that's important for people to understand what we did.
Sure. Well, it was first of all, before it was sealed, when we did that exterior inspection, we also, when we looked at the glazing, if there were loose pieces we saw, we took those out also. But in order to prevent it from falling to the ground and contaminating the soil or have people pick it up, the school staff facilities went on the ground floor, and an outside contractor went on the upper floor and sealed every single place where the glazing was and every single place where the caulking was, with, again, silicone caulking over the top of it.
So to hold it in.
To hold it in.
To prevent, you know, if somebody does touch it, they're not going
Right.
to get.
And this is only outside the school. Very important distinction.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What's the time frame to have the alternatives available?
The first part's on us, and that's to get you the spec that then you can put out the bid. And we're hoping to get that in the next month. And then as far as the bidding process, I'm not sure. Maybe
well, we also are working with our architect, because the windows, our main goal was to increase our energy efficiency and keep people warm, because it's really cold. Yeah. We found that the windows were a problem, but also there were heating units, vent units, I mean, in the walls. Two of them, one was functional, one wasn't, and you take the wall apart and there was no insulation where the one vent had been. So we're going to rethink how we do that, because, you know, we have less funds to work with, and we actually have more of an urgency to get the windows out now. So the first phase will be, we're working with our architect next week to see the standard of windows we were picking before, and can we maybe choose a different standard that's not so expensive. And secondly, figure out how to do the drywall work, maybe with our own staff, so that we stay within budget and get the windows replaced. Also, I'm working with Dan and the steering committee. The next phase would be, we weren't going to do the whole school, we were just going to use the west wing. So the next phase we're talking about in a couple of years, finishing this whole project. So
the other thing with the timing is, depending on which method we choose to handle the PCBs, one method would require that the plan go to EPA for approval, and that can delay things up to 2 months. So we need to talk that through to see which, it may save some money, but lose some time, and time is money, so we'll have to work through that.
So John, these windows are all of the same age in the whole school, correct?
Right.
So
well, not the entire school. There are some places in parts of the building, like the old superintendent's office. There was some replacements there done. There's some locations in the library that are
libraries new
age windows. So
The art wing.
But the
yeah.
likelihood is, in the future, we're gonna have to do the same thing when we replace windows.
Right, well, certainly we will always have to do the procedure and protocol that we outline, but you're right, there's a question mark on, other windows, other products that are going to be replaced, both at the high school, middle school, or any of our schools for that matter. Although I think it's probably, at least this particular situation with PCBs and the glazing, at least, superficially what we know is that this type of glazed window doesn't exist in other schools currently that we know of, But again, part of our work ahead is to identify and inventory, our windows now that we know this, so.
And so I think I know the answer to this, but there's probably no grants available for this kind of.
There's no grants that I'm aware of.
Mhm.
Some districts have embarked on some legal action against the former manufacturers.
Okay, thank you.
And we have asked that question, and we can talk further about that, but because of the age, there's not a lot of information.
And this is a relatively new issue, and it's not being handled the same way by EPA in all parts of the country. There's inconsistency there that doesn't make it easy for building owners to make decisions because of that.
All right, good.
Tom,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think important to note for people who are watching, we remain open. We do have information on our website. Frequently asked questions, probably more than frequent. There's a lot of questions and a lot of responses to that we posted up. But we do welcome, if there are questions or concerns, we are welcoming people to let us know.
Any questions come up at the staff presentation?
Yes, there were questions, and again, Tom was very helpful in responding to those. Both myself and John were there. So there were questions, and I think we satisfied and responded appropriately, but again, we're going to continue to hear more about. It's often hard, and Tom alluded to this, that there was low levels, right? But when you hear low levels, Tom did a good job around, what those levels were set at, and that I think was really helpful, because when someone just sees there was a detect, then they quickly go to, that was my room, and what does that mean to me? So we were able to provide some added information to that. We know this isn't done. There are going to be likely other questions that come out as a result, and we'll keep ahead of that.
Great.
And just to confirm, there are no other buildings, school buildings, that use that product?
We don't really know that, and so at least on the surface of the way in which the windows are glazed at the high school, to our knowledge, my knowledge, there's not other similar windows, but that product could be in various different applications in other buildings. So it's, again, I think the most important thing is every time we do anything, we're following our procedures and protocols around assessing, so we aren't doing that. So those are also some things we're going to need to consider and work with our facilities folks around, just doing, again, a general assessment. That's not all that perfect, though, right? Because if you aren't touching it or removing it and testing it, it's only a visual inspection. So, anyway.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So, as I said earlier, the first is that we do have, although I have not yet sent this out to the greater public, again, you're seeing just this letter. It will be sent out to all employees, but it's currently set for October 13th at 3:45 at the high school in the auditorium. I have confirmed, obviously, the folks that you see represented that will be there, and there's been some sharing of the information in which they'll be providing. So, again, I'm just letting the board know, again, if you have some things that you'd like to add or change, I'm happy to do so. This is, again, a draft well, it's a prepared letter that I'm ready to send out.
And will we have the organization on, is it on the HSA?
Right, HSA is part of future planning, yes.
Future
And so
planning.
future planning, sorry, would also, is going to be in attendance as well, as they were planned the last time we had them.
And how about Blue Cross Blue Shield representatives?
Definitely, yes.
We will.
Shield, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to get, when this goes out, I think it should be a more specific list of who will be
Yep.
there. And I know we talked about getting presentations ahead of time if
Yep.
possible, and then how about taping?
The taping issue is still present. I haven't re-asked that again,
Okay.
but it was explicitly shared with me last time. I can explore it again. My hope is that we'll get a good turnout, and the handouts and information that will be available we can use. You know, I'll ask again. Okay. And then the other part of my report is related to just the adequate yearly progress update. Again, I've asked Stuart just to give you a brief update on that, just to bring you up to speed. Again, I don't want people, I mean, I think it's important. We're part of the, you know, the organization that identifies not meeting, and we need to be forthcoming about that. But, you know, but I hope everybody understands that the measurements and marks that are being established are nearing,
No.
you know,
100%
percent,
efficiency.
right?
If you're not at 100%
Then you're-
efficiency, in fact, if it was last year's standard, South Burlington High School would have been the first school ever to come out of school improvement. They made it last year. They made it by more this year on last year's standard. So that's, doesn't. really-
Unless the subgroup population, right, Stuart? I mean,
100%,
yeah.
everybody, all things.
So is there any school in the state?
So if you
Right.
were already a school that hadn't been identified, say you were Rick Marcotte
Mhm.
Central School, and you did the SBAC,
Pilot.
Mhm.
they didn't call
Yeah.
it pilot last year, the pilot was the year before, but the SBAC thing,
Mm-hmm.
then your standing stayed the same.
Okay.
But that's the only schools.
So it's
very
more,
few.
it's more of a moratorium
It was a
on
moratorium
failing.
for them for a
Yeah.
year, right.
Okay.
So otherwise, it's 100%. I mean, I want to remind you that we're identified now in literacy, for example, at the high school, where 92% of the students made literacy proficiency, 68% of them with distinction. So, you know, that's an identified school. So that's, and that's 7 states without waivers, of which Vermont is one of the 7 states. So, I don't know if you have any other questions, but.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, with respect to school choice for Rick Marcotte, when will that, is this the last year that there could have been school choices current school year?
Well, if the law does
or
not change and there isn't, you know, either a waiver for the state or something else happens, then next year, based on 100% proficiency, Rick Marcotte Central School would have its second check mark, which would make it a school in need of improvement, and then there would be no school choice there. So theoretically, this is the last year that people would have school choice.
And so are we will stop busing kids?
Yes, so kids who have made school choice, if they would like to stay, they can stay, but they would then be responsible for their transportation.
Do we know how many students?
41 this year. It was 48 the year before. I don't know, you know, I can't off the top, you know, the year before that, but 41 students right now exercise choice in the district.
And do we know 41 are staying?
We have no idea who will be
Okay.
staying until next year.
Next year,
Because that's
okay.
this year's number.
Gotcha.
And it's really, you know, I think some will stay, and obviously some transportation will be a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
With those decisions, we've worked hard to be really clear with folks around, you know, kind of the implications upon them around making the choice, which is their right. But we wanted to be really clear, so as you know, if other siblings are likely to come along, we've really worked hard to be really clear with them. Both our office and the building level administration has also worked hard to do that.
Were we clear with parents that made the choice that transportation would not continue?
Yes.
We were, I mean, we, during the time of identification, we're transporting, that's what we're currently doing.
Mhm.
But as, again, as Stuart outlined, when, or if, Rick Marcotte, which we say when, next year, becomes identified, then that all changes, right? And so, that's an important component for people to be provided.
And even though we, you know, the official identification comes in August, but again, unless there's some change unforeseen, we'll do the same as we've done in the last few years, which is in May, send a letter out, and at that time, we'll tell people, you know, there won't be transportation.
Mhm.
Please let us know if you're going back to your home school or.
Now, again, we can change that. I mean, we could as a district, I mean, it doesn't mean we can't, but there's an expense associated with what we're doing. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't continue to, you know, to work out, you know, transportation for those that did that. But again, at this present time, we've been really clear that it would stop.
Well, I think, I mean, if you open that door up,
Yeah.
the onus is on
Oh, no.
administration to
Right.
make that decision
Correct.
and communicate it.
Right. Right now, we've been really, really clear about the commitment that you make when you make this choice
Mhm.
to go from either Chamberlain or Orchard to Rick Marcotte. So,
So what's the next draconian national, or the No Child Left Behind step that we might be facing if it's not repealed or if we don't get a waiver? I mean, when do we have to start replacing our
Well,
principals, staff,
for
administrators,
three
et
of the
cetera?
schools, as you see, are in what's called year one of corrective action, which is the next step. So the high school is in year two of school improvement. A corrective action means that we have a variety of choices that we need to make, which could include like weakening your administration or taking new curriculum on that theoretically creates results. Luckily for us, we've been working with the state. We got a grant last year to work with Jan Willie, a school consultant, on our MTSS work. And that continues this year, and that counts for our hiring an independent consultant to help you become, you know, better at what you do.
Can you say, what is MTSS? Again?
Multiple tiered systems of support. So it's the state's system of differentiation, just to make it simple.
it's had different terminologies before, most current.
Right, it was like RTI, you know,
Response
3
to
tiers, you know, first tier is, you know, good core instruction, second tier for students who are falling behind, third tier special ed help. So within that, there's a whole bunch of work that's being done, and we already had a consultant. That the grant just basically gives you a consultant to give us any money. You get the person, and so basically, there's no change for us. We were already, in a sense, a year ahead of what we needed to do for corrective action.
So so one of the options is to just change the curriculum. Is that, I guess I'd always read that, you know, there are terrible consequences, such as you have to, you know, get rid of your principal, or I mean, that's what happened to one of the Burlington schools and such. But that's not something we should be worried about at this
That's
point.
nothing at this point that would happen. If things just continue to drift along,
right,
after 2 years of corrective action, then we would go to the next level, and then I don't know.
So that, the high school, for instance, is at that point?
No.
yeah?
No, the high school's behind at that point.
It says Burlington High School. So
Year 2 school improvement. That's
So-
less than corrective
Well, but
action.
Chamberlain and Orchard
I got it.
and Tuttle are all for year one of corrective action.
Right, so then they would have to have year 2
two
of corrective action, and then theoretically year 1 of restructuring. That's,
so 2 years from now. If
Yes.
something doesn't change, if we don't get a waiver at the state level, or if the federal law
change.
doesn't
except
change.
that there are many school districts that are, quote, in restructuring.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and
there will be
very
an
little
uptick.
is happening, as
Right,
you can
right.
see. in
There's some
those.
legislative activity currently in play in Washington around what they're doing. Obviously, there's been a lot of activity around this.
Two bills in committee, they look totally different from the House and the Senate. You can just use your imagination.
But they know there's an issue, and there's, you know, obviously this is upon us around, you know, you have every school in the country, essentially, that's going to be identified, and going to have to, you know, they're being faced with this increasing expectation.
Do we know what the state is doing as far as submitting, reapplying for a waiver? Are they doing anything?
do not know at this time. I do know that the new Secretary of Education, is taking this very seriously, talking about how the state would determine its own measures. There are obviously controversies about the waivers if you read in the paper. I mean, it still gets down to that question of having or creating a system in which teacher accountability is tied to the testing. And that's the place, even with states that got waivers, isn't happening as easily as people thought. So it's just a political piece that we wait out and see what happens.
The Secretary's been pretty vocal around, yes, it's important, but those one singular measures are problematic, and that's not appropriate. So she's been very vocal. You probably have seen some of her op-ed releases in the most recent, probably within the last 3 weeks. She's been sharing some of that either on the news or in various other avenues. So that's AYP, or nobody wish to say that.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stuart.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, ratification of the SBAA agreement. Julie, do you want to give an update?
So Dan and I have engaged in very constructive conversations with the SBAA, which have resulted in an agreement that we feel fairly reflects the contributions of our administrators at a cost which our taxpayers can afford. We are proposing a contract with the SBAA for a 2-year duration, which represents a new money increase of 2.5% in year 1 and 2.75% in the second year. In addition, in recognition of extraordinary efforts on the part of our administrators during this uniquely difficult year, we're offering a one-time stipend payment in the amount of $500 to each member of the group in year 1. And I'd just like to say we're grateful for the contributions that this group makes on behalf of our district, for the professional manner in which they conduct themselves, and for the positive communication they promote within our community.
Any questions or comments? Do I have a...
Well, I think it's appropriate for me to make a motion that the board accept and, I guess, ratify is the word, I think well-deserved and appropriate contract that Ms. Beatty just outlined. So let me make the motion that we, as a board, approve and ratify as described by Julie.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. And thank you, Julie, for the comments of thanks and recognition of the administrative team.
Yep. And thank you. And I know that they're signed by Pat Phillips from the SBAA is in your packet for signature.
Great. All right, we'll move on to administrative reports.
So again, coming back on to some other familiar pieces, we have some administrative information around the Common Core and educational quality standards, and we've included just kind of some, and Stuart did a nice job of just highlighting some of the things you've probably seen and heard as far back as when Pat Burke provided an overview of the EQS information, and then Munson Field and Schools Out. So, I mean, don't necessarily need to go through, giving you a presentation on the Common Core and EQS unless you have specific questions to that. So let me just pause and ask how you'd like to proceed with that, as I have Stuart here.
I have a couple, just little questions.
Yeah.
Maybe not so little, but so I remember when Mr. Burke was here talking to us about this, and also this is a really good report, obviously a lot of information in here, but it doesn't really tell us how we're doing in terms of getting to the goal, the final goal.
Yep. I think that's fair. A part of this is that, we wanted to make sure that you are updated on where we are. Again, being reminded, not that you didn't remember some of the information that we shared last time. So that's important for us to share with you. Second, again, as you heard in some of the work, administrative retreat, our work in our individual buildings, things like our proficiency-based graduation, PLPs, some of which are obviously outlined in here, that we definitely have plans in place for that work. And so I would be happy to share with you some of the professional development timeline, kind of almost by month essentially, that Stuart and the administrators and I have worked out with them around getting to the meeting those goals.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I guess specifically when I look at this, I think about the amount of extra staff time that this is going to require, and it seems to me to be overwhelming given how difficult it is currently to kind of get into school and meet with people.
Yep.
And that's my main concern, and it talks specifically about how parents will be included, and I'm just wondering what the logistics of that are and
Right.
if it's actually reasonable.
Right. Let me just kick in, and then Stuart, you can continue. I mean, I think in many ways, we always get worried about federal mandates that come along that maybe, are don't have the resources or don't necessarily have connection and importance. In this particular case, I want to say that as a district, particularly in some of our areas, we've been doing a lot of the work. Those of you who know our sophomore exhibition, some of the things that we've been doing are absolutely in line with this work. And so while, yes, there's a load here, there's also been some consistent path in our efforts to do this very similar things. Obviously, when you look at, the implementation and the cost associated, we're really mindful of those, and I'm glad you brought that up. Nothing goes without, some implication in cost, in resourcing, professional development. So yes, that's true. I want to say that a lot of this is really right and appropriate for instruction of our youth. Stuart, I don't know if you wanted to add to Julie on that.
Julie, I mean, certainly this is, the major issue, time even more than money being a big piece. But again, as David said, I mean, one of the things is that, Pat Burke was looking at proficiency-based graduation long before it was a mandate. And what does that look like? And so that's not a new discussion at the high school. Tomorrow, all the CES are being trained to facilitate the kind of discussions that will need to happen in the departments to do that. Our TLC at the high school this year will all be about personal learning plans. We've been working with the Next Gen Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates funded for a possible grant, that we would be going over, not for next year, but for the year after. So there's a number of things, in the works. The beauty of this is that it's something that people feel is important. That being said, there's a lot here, and people's plates just got fuller, and that's just how it is.
I do, as I said earlier, which there's definitely the mindset of, as we implement this, what does that mean to the middle school? What does that mean to the elementary? And so that kind of, scaffolding, if you will, is happening. And there's been, again, conversation and plans put in place around the middle school, how we're working to meet those things as well.
And the last piece is one of the things that, that you saw and I point out to you is the continuous improvement plan. So right now, that's really for next year, but we've used that model with ourselves. Next year, the model has to come in front of you. One of the pieces within the continuous improvement plan, so somewhere around January or so, you'll start to see drafts you'll be sitting on, and that's when we have to begin to bring parents in, to the process as well. So that is, a different kind of process than we've been used to, but we, again, have time to begin to try to put that together. And, the hope is to make it something that's part of all the things we're doing, not separate little pieces, that, oh, I'm on this group, but doesn't know what that group is doing. I think that'll be the biggest coordination.
Just
ever.
to your earlier comment, Stuart, does something come off the table when this is implemented?
Well, yes and no.
It seems like
the
it should.
continuous improvement plan is supposed to be like one document that takes the place of the action plans that we have, the Green Mountain Star work that we do, and in fact, it's which is the work that has to do with school in need of improvement and the AYP stuff. and about 2 or 3 other paper kind of reports we do is all supposed to be wrapped into this one piece, the continuous improvement plan. That being said, the format that we've seen is a fairly involved one, you know, so it's not like it's an easier form. It's just trying to have schools only have to do one kind of report out instead of 4 or 5. Other than that, no, I don't think anything's coming off the table.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Here we
anyone
are.
want to ask the obvious question? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm assuming this was intended to be an improvement over existing systems. And I guess one of my questions is I hear a lot through the media of states that are the equivalent of seceding from the Common Core Union, as it were.
Right.
What's the basis of those actions?
So, without getting deep into the politics of it, I mean, I think there, as I've said before, I think there are 2 different movements. There's the anti-test movement, which is the question of whether the PARC or the SBAC or any test should really be the measure of students. So that is one pushback against, you know, both the question of Common Core, because I think in people's minds they're wedded together, even though they're not necessarily the same thing. You could have the standards without that kind of assessment. And then, you know, there has been some political movement. You know, it's been called Obamacare. You know, the question of whether the state, is it state, federal, it's that local control versus, and actually, you know, it was the governor's council, both Republicans and Democrats, who originally, you know, came up with the, you know, writing the Common Core. That's why so many states adopted it right away. So some of the pushback, and, you know, is just some political pushback, you know.
And I think
I don't know how long, I don't know how much that will stand. And there's the implementation pushback, which is, you know, there are teachers in some states, like Kentucky, you know, did this like right away, not a 4-year plan. Even with a 4-year plan, I mean, I could tell you that implementing the Common Core really well would take you 6 to 7 years. And in Vermont, we're being allowed that time, even though this is a full implementation year. I mean, it will speak for itself, but in some states, you know, people's curriculums were changed right away without training, and then, you know, they were held accountable even before the test this year. So that's the other pushback, you know, which is, you know, depending on how states implement it.
So is it spring 2015 that the SBAC will be administered?
Yes,
for the
this
first
year
time?
is the first
Okay.
year of the SBAC. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions. We've been working very hard, moving, you know, our curriculum along, but, you know, teachers can only change curriculum as much as, you know, to make it real. I mean, it's got to be deep and meaningful work, so we've been going slow to go fast, and we're hoping that over time that will have good results.
Just by way of contrast, I did have an opportunity to speak to someone in the California system who got informed like the day after their convocation that they were now Common Core.
Oh.
So.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, just one, I mean, these are 2 things coming from 2 sources. The education quality standards is much broader than just Common Core. I mean, the Common Core really only goes in here on the curriculum, content, literacy, and mathematical, and I guess scientific is the next down the road. So there's a lot of the stuff not related to Common Core.
That's true, yeah.
And I thought that when I saw this, it was helpful, but it did beg the same question that Julie had. It was, yeah, I really was wanting to understand how we were doing on these various items. But I think further, I mean, is that under policy governance really our purview? And I think probably it is, to at least be informed. I mean, this is not what, to the extent that this is helping us achieve the ends, which presumably it is, and we've had the presentation where it's been tied to the ends and such. But I think it would be helpful next time we see, you know, just having an idea that I want to be comfortable that we either are on track, or we have a plan to be on track
Yep.
for meeting each of these quality standards? This is just laying out the standard without telling us.
Yeah, so it's part of, just like we do with the teachers, part of it is, what is it we have to comply to? So I think there's, again, just a desire to keep this in front of you. I know this isn't your everyday work, but what are we being guided by? And that's number one. And then, how are we doing that work? And I agree, we want to be able to tell you that in order to meet these expectations, we're doing the following things in a sequenced way. And how are we doing? So I think it's a good point. We have it here because we wanted to keep you up to date, and I'm quite proud of where we are in comparison to. Doesn't mean we can't be doing better, but I'm proud of our work around using our information, our data, our professional development alignment, being mindful about the inclusion of what we're trying to do, and working collaboratively with the staff. I would say, there's a lot of folks, and it's easy to go to a kind of a dark place, but when you do look at some things, it says, that actually equates to good instruction or good outcomes. So it's hard to battle that. It's easier to go to the dark place and say, really, have they ever thought about, what about cost? What about, all of these other kind of unfunded actions that they're calling for is certainly easy. But. So, point well taken, and we'll work that in. Thanks.
Good.
And then the next is talking about the Munson Field. This is again was one of our. It's been on our agenda for quite some time. So, in the spirit to provide you with some information, you have some information that we included. Why don't I just pause and. Is there specific questions? Again, John has done a lot of this work, for me. So
I have a real basic question, probably a dumb question too. But what are the costs and benefits of, instead of having natural turf, having grass, rather than having to replace this every however many years? Doesn't grass just keep growing?
It does. I mean, again, we can.
But is there a cost-benefit analysis? What was the reasoning for going to the turf field? And is it? I know there was a lot of money up front,
right.
But now all of a sudden we got $400,000 we're staring at to put the field back in. Does it make sense to put artificial turf in, or does it make sense to have grass?
It's a good question.
It wasn't a dumb question?
No, it's not a dumb question. Obviously, the district for a good number of years survived on, grass fields. So it has been a luxury to have turf on our property. I will tell you that it has certainly allowed for us to maintain our co-curricular programming to the level that it is, and allowed for what I would say a really verbose use of that footprint of property being where the turf is. Typically, you can't play every day on. We have to rotate where people practice and play. You got to give I don't know what the right word is, rejuvenation time of the grass. You can't have soccer in the exact locations, although people don't often think about that. But we have to move them around and say you're going to be on field location 3 today. And, we have some pretty significant competing resources for the footprint that we're on. So the turf field has really allowed for us to get on early, to use with great level of repetitivity. We can be out there day after day after day. Obviously, there's a cost because now we're in 15 or year 15 and we're looking at replacement.
Right, and I guess I'm just asking that if natural grass is a viable alternative, there just should be a cost-benefit analysis. Maybe what you're saying makes perfect sense. That if we're going to make this big of an investment, we should be sure that it's the right investment. What you're saying makes sense. It probably is, but we probably should know that for such a big
over a 10-year period or the life of the turf, what would be the cost? Avoidance.
But at this point, don't we also have a sub-base underneath that turf field that would make it difficult to convert it back to grass?
Oh, well.
Absolutely.
Well, not
Right,
to
there's
mention,
drainage.
once you have a turf, are you really going to take it away from them?
Well, I think to the point being though, whether it's the maintaining of this or whether it's looking at
University of Michigan,
down the road,
big house.
how do you go about that?
now it's natural grass.
Well, was there analysis in the beginning, this happened a few years ago, right?
It
Was
did.
there analysis at that time, and is there any reason to question that it was not being fulfilled?
I don't know that it was or was not done. I wasn't around then. There was obviously a sizable amount of money that was,
Yeah,
fronted to begin the project, which
Right.
would have to be factored into
Right.
for that as well. But
And,
So-
and I guess the other question, I just haven't heard that we've had any problems, but I know that some schools have moved from turf because there's a higher incident of injury on artificial turf than there is in grass. Maybe that's
Yeah.
not an issue with this, but
I would say that we have worked hard to be educated around how to maintain and take care of anywhere from how do we ensure that infections can be mitigated and what's the right procedure. There's rubber pellets in there, and for a period of time we weren't quite sure, and we certainly seeked out professional advice on how much you put in there or how little. That all factors into injury avoidance. So we worked hard, and again, back when it first started, there wasn't a lot of information. We're definitely in a much better place, and I think our turf is certainly not new, but we work hard to maintain it appropriately and keep it there. Good question. I don't know that we have. John, do you know? I've been talking, but do you know if we ever?
There is quite a bit of expense on just a regular turf grass field.
Right.
For instance, our old football field is in pretty sorry shape. We had Steve Bach, that Civil Engineering Associates, look at that last year, and we were due a report on that just to see what kind of maintenance would have to be done to get that back up to field level playing. I mean, we use it for a practice field, we use it for the Dolphins and that kind of thing, but so it's not free.
no.
And I know you know that.
Yeah.
I do think that some things that we don't see is how often that's used. The middle school for PE and for recess and for a gathering place for drills and that kind of thing. It's used not just for the co-curriculars. It's used in some of our academic programs. So
And rent it out, obviously, that when it's not in use, we rent it out. Which is also part of, you couldn't do that if it was grass. You couldn't be using it almost 24 hours isn't right, but to be using it as frequently as we have.
But I think that's important to lay those things out, because if we're asking the public to support a budget that's going to have $400,000 for a new turf field, you're going to get some vociferous pushback on that. So,
Good point.
Yep.
Thinking ahead, we should lay that out. If you have natural grass, it's going to be used 20% of the time, whatever the number is, which is significantly cutting into the benefit of having the turf field. And on the cost side, grass is going to cost X amount. I think it probably can be justified, but I think we need to do that.
I know that in our little softball field they call it the pit field. It's the old baseball field. It's behind my office back there, to the south of the turf. The drainage failed there 3 winters ago, and it cost us $56,000 to fix. So once again, the drainage has to be there the way our land is located. So we can talk about that. The rental will never pay for a new turf. It's a small part of how the field gets used, and it just happens that last year the winter was very severe, and the Nordic soccer group that uses it barely rented it, and our Vermont Ice Storm, who rented it the last 2 years, which brings in some significant funding, has folded. So it's not a guaranteed source of funds.
So
I think we can show we've stewarded that and done a good job with the rentals we've had. We don't have bathrooms, we don't have team rooms, and still we were able to do a pretty good job with it.
So the new, if it were replaced, the $400,000, is the life expectancy the same as it was 15 years ago?
I think it's going to be 12 years, yes.
Oh, it's worse?
No, David didn't quite have that right because it was built in 2004.
Oh.
So it's only warranted for 7.
Oh.
And the people who put it in, Progress, come and do that annual maintenance, and they assess it every year. And we've gotten good marks on care, but if you look at the grass in most of the field, it's like someone's just cut it. If you go down to the D zone, back to the East Woods, and I think Elizabeth remembers we did that separately. The grass is that tall, you know, so it does wear out, and it's a function of weather. It's not just use, but I've looked at fields as I've traveled around. I don't travel very much, but I've tried to talk to athletic people and say, how much? And 10 years is pretty good. We're going to get 12 years is what we're planning, and so that's a good thing.
So I know I asked the question whether or not we've approached the foundation on supporting this project. Is that something that's been brought up or discussed?
Really, we haven't yet. It is in the works though, and with our new activities director at Hockenberry, that's actually something that John and I and he will be kind of shepherding to fold that also into our stewardship plan and have the conversation and what might be reasonable and appropriate for them to assist us with. I've kind of held off, on any activity currently with the foundation until we have a more defined plan. I think it's important not just to be, all, for lack of better words, athletic oriented. It's also a foundation that supports, all learners. And so a more defined plan on where we are and where we're going. Obviously, master planning and visioning is a big component of this, so that we don't get something and then say we don't need it or we're doing something different. So I think all these things are kind of very much connected.
It would also seem like we would want to leverage our alumni and development office.
Absolutely. That's also part of this. Yeah. They're certainly part of this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think I made a point to meet with Ed. Probably it bothered him a lot because it was the first couple of days he was here, but I wanted him to get an assessment of what this was. He also has other ideas for other athletic, the weight room, etc. But that's not included here because it's not in the enterprise fund. He definitely agrees, Elizabeth, that foundation is key.
And alumni.
And I don't. We shouldn't neglect the boosters. They've raised a lot of money through the concession stand, working pretty hard with that, and they've been setting that aside for restrooms and a team room, and they have over I think it's $53,000 now, and I think they'd be willing to go further with that.
So it is pulling them all together with a unified plan. Again, we kind of, when you talk about boosters, the boosters are tapping into community members and alumni. The foundation is tapping into business organization, alumni, community, as well as our alumni person as well. So it's really important to connect with clarity around where we are and what we're trying to do. And I would honestly say that we aren't there yet, but I've been hesitant to just go and ask to raise money without that clarity. So.
And the balance, I know I asked the question also on the balance on the bleachers. Is that from the foundation?
It's from the alumni director. Joanne does that. She sells she gets advertising outside and has been dedicated for this for many years. So she's of the 40. I have it here.
42.6.
11 something.
Yeah, it's down to 11,000. She paid down $6,000 last year. So it's almost there. Okay. It was 2008 though. Yes, it's
been a while.
It is. And that's, I don't know, I put that table in the back to show you what projects could be happening, but I also want to keep the history of what's happened in the last 7 or 8 years, since 2004, with the turf and the field lights and the bleachers and concession stand, and say, well, boy, donations took care of a lot of it, taxpayers took care of a lot of it, and when we used to have impact fees, that took care of the lighting, and so it's, keep that as a background. Just not to lose that.
Okay. Thank you, John. So we'll move on, if that works, on to the Schools Out update. And again, John worked with Lee Lamphere, who's here with us tonight, around the Schools Out program. And again, just I think really important to know, and I think all of you know this, how important our after-school programming is, has been, and continues to be under Lee's leadership and his staff. We have worked, and Lee has worked hard to accommodate all of our parents to making sure that their children are in places after school that is, safe, exciting, and really allows them to continue to grow and develop. And that's really been a really important piece. Lee and his staff are being asked an awful lot of questions around the state, around how are you doing this? Can you help us? And so we've and I think one of the most important things for me is Lee's really worked hard to work with our staff around the continued learning opportunities, both either in the summer or after school. And this summer was a great example, and then I'm going to stop talking, but around their melding, again, Stewart and Joy and Godak deserve credit along with Lee as well, around melding in both the summer service pieces along with the Schools Out summer program. And to get feedback from individuals who've had to come here for services in the past over the summer, for those students to say, and moms and dads to say they're so excited to come in the summer, when before it was, I don't want to go to. Lee and his staff have made it extremely exciting, but yet engaging and beneficial to their academic success. So a lot of really many things to celebrate. But I know you have some specific questions around the Schools Out program, particularly around the funding and allocation of resources. And so without further ado, either John, and I'll turn it to John.
Yeah, I want to bring up the accounts receivable issue. Lee's been growing with this program for many years, and he had a lot of responsibility, even with the finances. So when the funds would come to the office, the business office, we would count for that on a cash basis. And Lee was managing the accounts receivable, but he was, it becomes increasingly complex as to why people aren't paying, and when does somebody be relieved from the program. And I do believe that Lee said, boy, I can't handle this anymore. I'm coming to the business office. I need some help because I have some really high dollars outstanding. And when I saw that, I thought, why didn't I ask how you're doing your receivables before? So it's kind of a oversight that we weren't doing this better. We do now record the payments in our office. We have an accounts receivable system and a report that shows every balance. We can run it daily, we run it monthly, and we're doing what we should be doing with accounts receivable. But we have a lot of catching up to do. In the questions, you'll see a little table of the $90,000 that's outstanding. It's on the back of the questions. There's a little table. Everybody see it?
Yeah, it's on the back of your questions. It's,
So how old is the debt, John?
Well, some of it goes back a few years. For instance, the top one. We're not naming names or anything. That's why it's like this, a little cryptic. But
like less than 5 years?
Some are more than 10.
Some are more than 10.
Some were I inherited when I came on.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it just carried over. So $90,000 over 10 plus years. It's really about 1.5% of our total gross revenue. That's a guess, so that's an estimation. Not, you probably have better numbers than that, but and some are, most of them are quite old. We've improved collections immensely, mostly through this new phase is going to be great, but up until now, setting policies in place that restrict families from enrolling if they have a debt, so they can't enroll in summer unless they pay up the debt that they have. Same with a fall enrollment, that kind of stuff. So that's really improved the process. And we might get into this a little bit later, but there's this snafu with subsidy payments through the state. In the past, the time that it takes for an application to get fully processed can take several months, in which time we would typically enroll children in our program and assume that they're going to back pay, which in most situations they do, but in rare situations they do not. And then we're left in a situation where a family who is really can't afford that lump of money there, and can't really afford the tuition in general, is left with a large balance. The state is requiring a 7-day turnaround time as of starting, I believe, soon. I don't think they're quite there because it's been more than 7 days on several families, but that's going to help also with that piece to the puzzle.
We took it, Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher helps us, some of their associates help us with, in the past, with our receivables for tuition, for instance, and the first one, we found that the parents, their home was foreclosed, and there's no prayer of ever getting that. We will recommend that to the board sometime in the future when we have a group. So right now it stays there, but the note is it will be recommended for write-off. And then other people have made payment plans and started being faithful. And other people we've talked to and haven't followed through. So this list will get edited more, and we'll do our best to collect what we can of the $90,000. The smaller accounts, there's about 35 that, or 30, I guess, that are in the $30,000 area. That are, a lot of them are small, and some of them have paid. So it's these are the worst. That's what I want to say.
So, I mean, I think it's safe for you to hear from me that while we have many good things going on, this is an area of problem, right? And should not have been here. And systems should be in place, you know, around how we do this. And here we are, and there are some now things put in place that have been now to correct this. So.
So just a quick question, the surplus, the overall fund balance, when we do a write-off, at some point if there's a write-off, does that count against that surplus, or is it the way you do cash accounting that does it?
It will, but we've done cash accounting, so this fund balance doesn't include these receivables right now. When the auditors come back in, first of all, I reported to them when they were in here in late June. I went to them and they said, well, you got to tell the board. I said, we have a meeting coming up, and that's why I went insisting that we did schools out right here. And also that it'll be an audit management note and policy violations. So, but whatever we collect will increase our fund balance, because we hadn't booked this as receivable on the books. It was on
revenue collectible.
Right. It was
and the write-offs will have no effect because of the way you've been accounting for it.
Right.
My question was whether, and maybe I misunderstood the answer, but it was really around, you know, should financial statements be restated to reflect that? And if I look at the total revenue for 2014, it's about $26,000. But if you look at the bad debt or the AR, it's $90,000. So it kind of nets out negative to negative $64,000 for that reporting period.
But the revenues, the receivables that we have here are not included in that revenue.
But that's my point, is are we misrepresenting the health of the program?
Based on that?
No, this is still a conservative approach, because if we record the receivables and assume we're going to get them all, it'll be $90,000 more than this. So our fund balance would be, our revenue expense for the year would be
And 100.
115,000.
So that was the answer to my question.
Yes.
I was under the, okay, so
You were
they're
writing
not
it.
counted in.
Yeah, I know what you're,
Okay.
right, yep.
Okay.
John, are there any other enterprises or other such things
Yep.
in
Yeah.
which
Yep.
there are parent or student-related underpayment
Situations like this, yeah.
situations
Yep.
like this? Or is this the
Well,
only position
enterprise
that-
fund that's
you know, like
officially a
nutrition
program.
services, for example, or students, I don't know how that gets paid for. Are there any people that are, I'm just looking to see if we have an existing policy that could just go into this.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to create.
No, nutrition.
Well, I
is-
think,
We have a policy that should cover this.
right, and I think to your point, though, is, probably is, what else is out there that you don't know
Yeah, there's
about,
what
that
else
you're
is
doing?
out there, and
That's
if
right.
there is something, and we do have a way of treating it, is it appropriate to do it here, or do we need to modify it?
A process.
Well, by way of example, students have accounts for their meal plans
Right,
that
that's
they charge against a balance, a positive balance.
Yes.
And they're-
So I'm assuming we don't have the equivalent of accounts receivable for nutrition services
No.
because either there's a positive balance or they're not getting fed.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
I think they give
Right.
them a couple.
No,
Yeah,
times,
well,
a
it
couple
might be the
lunches.
peanut butter
Yeah.
sandwich or
At the end of
something.
the year,
Those-
when seniors leave,
Yeah.
we have a liability, we pay whatever they have left. So it is,
What if
It's
there's
not
a
a-
negative balance? And it doesn't mean just for seniors, but what if any kid has a negative balance? What happens?
Well, we try not to get into that. I mean, in some case, I think Martin alluded to it, that there's a period of grace period and compassion perhaps, but we have some we have some very clear guidelines about what you can't just keep going through the line and not paying.
Right.
So it prompts up on our pay registers that you have a zero account, and this is your choice, right? Your choice is, we offer you, the supplemental lunch until that happens. In some cases, there's probably a few that get through, but we have controls in play at all 5 schools regarding that. And in some cases, as John said, we have people that fill up their account and maybe don't use it, right? And
the difference between this and what Schools Out has been is that's all coordinated by our office, so we knew about it, and we make the accounting entries and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So, and that never gets to be
That-
4 figures, for
Okay.
instance,
I
or
mean, I do wanna
3
say-
figures.
For Lee, I just have a question. When I think about, the debt that these families are incurring, I just can't help but wonder, are they ever referred to like school social workers and to kind of look at the financial picture and
got it.
to see if perhaps they're not accessing some other resources and just kind of.
Yeah, so families that do qualify for state subsidy quite often are working with school social workers. I refer people directly to Child Care Resource, who handles the application for state subsidy and that kind of stuff. But as far as, I don't actually usually refer to social workers, and I don't know if they necessarily do that kind of thing.
I didn't know if perhaps like a family might be choosing not to pay a Schools Out account because they're buying food and there might be other resources that a family might be able to avail themselves of.
Right.
So.
But what I'm finding is, when I get involved in any of these collections issues, I really get involved. And I find out a lot about the family situation and refer them to a multitude of different resources, be it Child Care Resource if they qualify, if they're unemployed, helping them through that. We get quite a few families who actually fall in the rears when they get unemployed, or a family or multiple family members. We had 2 parents go unemployed, and they pulled the children for a period of time, came back, but at that point they were already down $600 or $700, and it was hard to even get that back. So it's really getting involved, and for me it's nice to be able to then get John's assistance with this, because
you interface with them.
I do want what's best for families and best for children,
Right.
and in those situations parents have to make a tough decision. In prior years, pulling your children out could mean losing that spot for the rest of the year. So when you do get back on your feet, one person just told me that today. She said, "That's what happened. We lost my job. I didn't want to tell you, but I didn't pay for a while, and because I wanted them to be here, and I was embarrassed." And but now we've we've actually increased our capacity by a lot. We're taking a lot more kids, and we have a lot more flexibility with that. And I am encouraging families, you know what, if you do need to pull the child, you're not accruing that debt, then you can come back when things are better. And you know, that kind of relationship helps, and then they're wanting to pay more towards their debt as they move along. So we actually have all the families that are involved now that have a debt that are in our program are making payments.
So John, going forward, to have a clean picture of how the enterprise fund is doing, when you collect these old debts, that should be delineated so that we don't think that a debt collected from 5 years ago.
Exactly. What's going to happen, I believe the auditors will allow me to do this, is I'll book whatever the amount is, $90,000, I'll record that as a receivable, and then at the same time do an allowance for doubtful accounts that shows $80,000, so that the net effect on the books might be 10, and then we adjust that every year, because you wouldn't have a one-time jump of revenues that we're not going to realize. That's how we'll handle it.
Right, or realizing revenues from not that operating year, so you don't get a clear picture of really how the enterprise fund did in the current operating year.
Second line on the revenue thing.
Yeah, that'd be okay.
So two lines underneath the revenue. One is current revenue, and the other is, I don't know what you want to call it.
I think the important thing is to try to isolate.
Yeah, you have the information.
Right.
So
And
when
then
you
you
say
would lump.
candidate for collection, John, is that something you do in-house, or do you have a
Well,
you send them to collections?
I'm trying to figure to get some outside.
Some
because
outside.
after when they're a
Exhausted.
candidate for collection, that means we've tried, we've emailed,
Okay.
we've written, called, and then,
So
okay,
we
what's the
hire.
next step?
Yeah. And just one last question is, so in the summer they prepay, so this is not an issue. Is that
Our policy is actually that we require prepayment
all the
for
time?
all services. That's what's
Okay.
stated in the handbook. But our practice of billing was that we'd send a statement out at the end of the month that showed all of the charges that occur. So the habits of families is to pay when you get the invoice, which means you're already 4 weeks behind at that point. So we've this year we instituted a bill ahead. So we're billing ahead for the month. So I just issued all the bills and charges for this coming month, and I've got a ton of payments to pay this down. So you know, it's going to be hard to keep track of. We are going to have people that fall behind a little bit, and we just need to make sure that we're I'm connecting with John and then following through with next steps, either the payment plan or possible termination from the program. And several of these past debts have ended in a termination, or the parents deciding to pull their children out, and then unfortunately those tend to be the families that are harder to then get in touch with and to get funds from. So a lot of times if the debt is just shrinking slowly and not building, you know, we're getting more revenue from that situation than if somebody just hits the road.
Okay. Thanks.
So there's no more waiting list? Is that what?
We have a tiny wait list right now, but I think by next week I'll be able to squeeze all those kids in. David and I got together and we were really fed up with the situation where families would wait in line all night.
Yeah, I was just saying,
Some of you
no
heard
more
about that.
camping overnight necessary.
Yeah, and I've always had a problem with it, and I've, you know, other people I've spoken with have suggested sticking with it because it really, the people who really put an emphasis on after-school program will be there. But I've seen nannies wait in line. I've seen paid people, grandparents, parents who can take the time off, and people who aren't able to stay. You know, a single mom who maybe can't take the day off. So it was really feeling like it was an unfair system. So when David and I discussed it, we went with a lottery, but I strongly suggested that we increase the capacity to a certain amount, and if we get a certain amount under that, you know, submissions into the lottery, that we just enroll everybody. And so we've actually added a kindergarten separate program, which is it's the first couple days have been phenomenal. It's so great that the curriculum's going to be better across the board. We serve more families. Kids have a better time. It's win-win.
That's great.
And the middle school programming too, around a little bit more flexibility for
Yeah, so
for those as
the
well.
announcement for that is going out soon. Carson's going to put out a letter to families that we are offering as-needed service. Families can register online right up until the week before the program, or they can call us on our hotline up until noon day of to have their kids come to the program. So if you have a late meeting, give us a call. Hey, my kid's got to be there today. Boom, they're there. If we're going to couple that with curriculum enhancements, cooking clubs, technology clubs, stuff like that that's going to draw kids to the program where they can just register for those days that they want.
That's feedback that we had as a result of,
That's
again,
awesome.
we were offering it before, but it was kind of an all or nothing.
It's
And
based
it's
on the
very
same
different
model.
developmentally at this age level, and so, again, through Karsten and Paul and
And it's
and
mostly a
Lee's work.
scheduling thing. Middle school kids have busy schedules, families have busy schedules, and if we can just kind of fill the gaps there, we'll do well.
Is this the year though, Lee? It's, my recollection is this was like the third year. Is this the make or break?
This is the third year. Last year, we recruited a lot of high school volunteers, which really helped keep our salary down and gave us a lot more flexibility. We're going to continue with the same model this year. We had just a great core of high school students come in, former schools out students who are really connected to the program, and we're going to continue with that model. It works well. They connect well with the kids. So I don't think it's going to be the program that makes a ton of money. I think it's going to be a program that coasts along but serves families well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
This report's not from October 29th, 2013. Apologize for that.
Oh, I had one other quick one for you too. The policy that I think related to accounts receivable, you mentioned board policy 4.3, item 9. I think it's supposed to be 2.4, item 9.
Financial conditions and activities.
Yeah, 2.49. Not,
Yeah,
not
it is. You know, those
4.38.
two things, the date and that,
Yeah.
Delina pointed out to me, but I got the
We
wrong
can
one.
correct that.
Yes, you're right.
Fine.
Thank you, Lee. John?
Thanks.
Thanks, Lee.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 12, treatment of staff, 2.2. You want to highlight that, David?
Sure. I think this report remains fairly consistent with what we've done in the past, or what I've reported in the past. I have added some additional evidence in detailed policy 3 to acquaint staff with protections under this policy. And obviously the implementation of Safe Schools, which we've implemented this year, which, you know, I'm happy to say is going to be a really helpful and informative way to do the work, is a highlight. And then in trying to give some additional evidence, although I know there's some additional questions in this area around, you know, failed to create a positive organizational climate conducive to achieving the ends, how I interpret that, and then some of the evidence, obviously. And so I've tried to give back again on our information that comes back through our information off of our website, or any questions that come in. I've tried to give that without giving a whole lot of specificity. Maybe there's a need to dig in a little bit more to this. I know that there was a question that came up around grievances as a condition or of kind of the positive organizational climate, although that doesn't necessarily mean that there's negative or positive. I kind of saw the grievance process as something that you, at least for the majority of the staff, with the exception of teachers, are in the pipeline for that. And that if something is not satisfied at my level, then you become involved. So I suppose we could say a component of the evidence is that I'm not sure how often you've been contacted, right? In my time, not much at all, maybe a couple times. So I'm not really sure about, you know, getting that data in there. I want to be also careful about the contractual,
Well, I think, I can speak to some of this. Some of these were my questions, where you indicated in evidence that feedback surveys are utilized on a regular basis, and that grievance procedures are clearly articulated and adhered to, but there's no quantified or qualified information that is evidence around content of feedback surveys or volume of grievances or,
Right.
I mean, you've got sort of number of emails that are categorized here below, but relative to evidence, I just found this evidence wanting in terms of
More.
what it means to 2.2 treatment of staff.
I mean, I'm struggled with trying to find, what evidence to put in there or how to do it, I guess, was my, I'm open for some suggestions, that being one.
I mean, I think you make a good point that we don't really, although we may get complaints and things as board members, we don't document those usually unless not the general complaints that we get. I think if something rises to the place where we need to talk to you about it, I mean, but still, even if we do that, we don't really document that in any way.
Well, again, part of, I go back to what the policy is, creating a positive organizational climate. Certainly, as we alluded to, and again, Stuart's a big part of this too, around the surveys that we push out, or we put out. And so how can I provide evidence, of what comes back to us, provides us, the organization, with information that affirms that that we are creating a positive organizational climate, and or we're taking corrective actions to that. So I don't know, I'm wandering around a little bit on you. I'm not really sure. I'm happy to be thinking about this a little bit more. I haven't spent an awful lot of time with Stuart or some of our other surveys that go out to say, could I pull that into kind of...
Well, you must have data or stats on the surveys that you send out, right?
We do. It all comes back. But I want to be careful not to just, sugarcoat that we do it and we get, and 97% agree. I mean, I don't know how I would quantify. So I'm struggling a little bit about how to provide you the evidence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it, and what you're saying is that you're soliciting feedback.
Yeah.
But it doesn't close the loop around how did that feedback contribute to, a positive cultural environment, to your point of.
Right.
So is there a year-end survey that goes out to the teachers? Is that right? Is that part of that survey?
Well, we do it I do it, as administration, myself included, but that's more about, it's more about individual feedback. And it doesn't roll up the whole thing about how do you feel you're being treated, as an employee within the district. I mean, one of the things I've reached out to kind of the policy governance folks to say, here again is kind of the user group question, like, what are you doing about this? I do find that we're kind of, a little bit ahead of things, and so usually when I ask, it's like, well, no, what are you? Oh, that's a good idea, but so I have a question now.
We've seen some kind of climate survey kind of things conducted by the NEA and some of the things that have been presented. I mean, should this become a routine that there's that form of the survey, or that's part of the survey that's going out
embedded as a component of the evidence
to
on an ongoing
understand
basis,
how the climate has been, and maybe that's not a year-end thing, maybe it's a mid-year kind of thing, so there could be course corrections if there's if there is a climate problem, if there's dissatisfaction and such.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think that could be a great. What I also need to be mindful of is that I don't put you in the box of a violation of the grievance process.
Well, and I'm thinking on grievances, even just doing, I wouldn't know if there was a year-by-year trend that said grievances are up or down.
Right.
So that may be a barometer, but I also don't know from this is whether you feel this feedback opportunity process that was put in place is
Good.
good. Yeah.
Right.
It's just, well,
I'm
stating the
essentially showing
obvious,
that it
it's-
works,
yeah.
or it's
Well, you're
being used.
You're showing that it's
Yeah.
being used and that things are coming in various categories.
And I also think if you're using surveys and you have data from periods of comparison, that you could, if you noted a trend coming back, that 38% responded in a way that created a red flag, you could implement a change, and then for that next reporting period, 75% reported improvement or something, so you're actually reporting data that shows that there's
activity that's happening
Yeah.
to correct it. Yeah. Well, what I want to make happen is that regardless of who's in this position, that there's a system about providing it, right? And that's the test that it needs to pass. I mean, I would like to say that, you know, my actions with my staff are being very diligent about listening and responding to, but that doesn't pass the evidence test to you.
Well, and one of the other questions I had was really, are we measuring responsiveness? Because we as a board have definitely got feedback on the timeliness of responses. So, you know, you may be reporting, you know, 7 complaints and 4 questions, but we don't know if those responses were provided, you know, within 48 hours or within 6 months.
So what I would suggest is, again, the helpful feedback, that we table this and let me come back with some, you know, with some different ideas, along with some suggestions that I get from the policy governance user group to see how they're doing it, and see what I can come up with. Does that make sense?
All right, so we'll table that. We'll move on to agenda item 13, private paying tuition students.
So I don't have anything prepared for you. Again, it's a discussion topic, and it's likely we'll want to talk more about this and keep it on. But I think most of you know we have a policy. It's F13 in our policy that talks specifically about our tuition, and it's outlined and specific to Title 16, Chapter 21, Section 822, which really embodies all of what we do. Clearly, I think you know that if you don't have a high school in Vermont, you have some choices as a school board or supervisory union to tuition out your students, either to a designated school or to anyone your student or family wishes to go to. And so that currently is in play. We previously had a policy, or we were in a place where we accepted private paying tuition. This was during John Everett's stay, and some of you were perhaps around in that discussion. But what we obviously identified is that we put the district in a huge liability around our inability with Fidelity to carry out programming for our own students. And that really is the fundamental issue, whereby which we could say, particularly in this place where we're looking at diminished revenue around choice, our choice situation, we could say it would be really nice to bring in private paying tuition to help fill that. But what I think is really important for us to recognize is that I believe our policy is right and just where we are now, and that I don't feel that we should open up to private paying tuition because of the liabilities it exposes us to. And again, John, along with Ron Smith, we've had many discussions about what others are doing, why we shouldn't, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, and that really remains the situation at hand, that we should not get into accepting a private paying tuition environment. So there's a whole lot of different things. I'm happy to, obviously, if you haven't seen F13, I'll make those available to you if you'd like. There's a fair amount of other guiding documentation that helps schools, SUs, or districts and supervisory unions understand kind of that, along with the statutes that are online that
Is
do that.
anyone, David, in Chittenden County accepting private paying?
Not that I
tuition
know of.
students?
I think where you get into situations right now is up into the St. Johnsbury area. And there also can be quite the disparity. I think they're struggling with this right now, whereby which their high school programming may be bringing in revenue that's unbalanced from their primary grades. And that creates, again, some great disparity that's a concern, and I've had the opportunity to read a little bit more about that. So I think, we had it on here as a possible revenue generator perhaps, and continuing to be able to provide our programming, but it is a liability from my perspective that we do not at this point want to be entering into. John, we're on private paying tuition, and I know that, no, it's fine. Ron's, you deserve a drink, well, I should say that you deserve a cup of coffee, Ms. Better. Excuse me, Maureen. But private paying tuition, I mentioned Ron Smith, and I know, conversations, and maybe from an accounting perspective, you might be able to shed a little bit more light on that.
One reason this was on Dan pointed out it was on there for so long was our past assistant superintendent thought it would be a good idea to kind of model the St. Johnsbury, have kids that are residents 24/7. And so Ron Smith, as you've seen either in on the screen or around, he went to school in St. J, and he had a lot of ideas, but he said, boy, don't go that way. First of all the costs involved in housing the kids, and then the taxpayers are on the liable when enrollment goes up and down. And we're pretty flexible here. I mean, I guess we're flexible, but we have methods there, but we have to pay for 24/7 housing and that kind of thing. It's not worth it. And I think we probably it's kind of intuitive that that'd be a whole jump ahead, but that was
I guess my question, I never understood this to be we're going to house students. It was just what if somebody from Burlington who was not allowed to come here wants to just...
Well, that's part of it, but I'm just saying that this has been on there as was rejuvenated because there was an idea, hey, we can make money on doing this. Other people have done it successfully, but it's liberal arts colleges, they're very cyclical, and that...
But what if the situation of just a Burlington, Essex, Colchester, whatever, a student locally who the money won't follow from the state, are we allowed to have them come here and have them pay 14, 15, whatever our tuition that we're charging, for instance, to islands and stuff?
We absolutely could.
And what's the downside of that part? I mean,
well, again, I think the downside is that, number one, I think we need to think long and hard about the population in which we serve, South Burlington, and whereby which we have class sizes that may, ebb and flow. It may be at, a disadvantageous benefit to our students, because now we could set that, but then we also enter into, we're getting into those that can and those that can, and we're getting into situations around a diverse population and supporting our students.
Well, that part I can understand, but the other part doesn't make sense to me, because we've been worrying about the fact we're going to lose $250,000 worth of tuition, and we haven't had any problem with the rest of our student population having however many students those were. So your diversity that makes more sense to me.
The other issue that came up the last time this conversation came up was also whether there were special servicing requirements for students that would come in under a set tuition rate, but have a requirement for substantial services.
Okay, is that one of the liabilities?
That's absolutely right.
Be an exposure.
Absolutely right, and
So if we get a student like that, the student needs additional services, and they pay $15,000, but it ends up it's going to be $30,000 more. We can't collect that from the state. we can't collect that from the
Well, because we're
parents, or is that?
there
is that
there
the-
are components here of the LEA being somewhat responsible, but where you get into the overrunning cost to provide the program, which we're then required to do so, can be very much out of balance. And I think you look to me to how you're going to.
I think some
how
of
you're
it's
gonna
a
run the resourcing.
complexity of administration is what
Okay.
it ran into before.
So again, this is, and we can keep this back on, we can kind of come back with more information too, but I really think that where we need to be spending time is working more collaboratively around our choice, our current choice, as we had it before with our pre-agreements within Chittenden County particularly, where money, or resources I should say, follow the student. And as you know now, that doesn't happen. And part of some of the work that we're going to do with some of our added resources in the financial analyst work will be to look at what has happened, even in this short period of time, but what's happened with choice around money not following students. We know that it's not been beneficial to students, and certainly we're an example of that. And to try to use some of that data that supports the choice work. So,
Can I just ask a question on clarity? At the high school level, after we set our capacity for school choice, a parent who lives in Vermont couldn't pay private tuition to come. They can either come because they have school choice. We're really talking for state residents, K-8, or out-of-state residents paying private tuition. I think your question, Martin, when you asked it, wasn't quite answered correctly.
Or I think in the past we had the flexibility to earmark part of the capacity for private paying tuition students.
But there's now total school choice around where the money doesn't follow the student. So if you don't have the capacity,
it's a
if you don't have the capacity to accept more than 5 students, how are you all of a sudden finding capacity?
So you can see the
private paying students. Well, because they're paying. I mean, it's an easy answer.
So when John was talking about, when the past assistant superintendent was this idea that out of state who may live with their relatives or whatever, whether we would house them or not. And I do know the last time we took a 7th, 8th grade student from a neighboring community, I mean, there were underlying reasons in the end, and it does get to be, why would you pay?
So is
And who
revenue
can
the
pay?
only reason we would consider something like this?
Say again?
Is revenue the only reason why we would consider something like this?
No, I don't. I think that depending on our future enrollment as a district, it may be something that we would, you want to consider. I mean, if our enrollments went way, way down, it may be an opportunity to have this conversation, more broadly around how we ensure, because it could be the opposite of that we're, enrollments and population are such a decline that we would want to do this, I guess.
Yeah, well, one of the things that comes to mind.
To support our
is
learners.
which in my head is related to this, I don't know how the others would feel about it, is that we've talked in the past about possible collaborations and having certain places where it's hard to get a minimum size class together to provide some particular disciplines of skills. And it would seem that, to me, to me, that's a potential source of revenue. It's also a potential source of loss of revenue if other places, if we lost students to going there. But I would like to see us, rather than put effort into this kind of a thing, put effort into thinking about what kind of collaborations could be done that have the overall effect of reducing costs, providing a better educational opportunity. I think when Wynn was here, he had some discussion about busing people around to do things and that sort of stuff. That's the last I remember us chatting about that at all. Those days I was in the audience, not up here. But
again, we can talk more about that. That's still in play, and we're working to collaborate. I'm hosting all of the Chittenden County Superintendent's meetings here in our conference room, and as a result, we will be talking about, part of the dialogue and discussion needs to be predicated around the data in order to get to the conversation, from my perspective. So we need to be able to demonstrate, that for us or for others, what's happened. And we're very quick to not use that, I think, as a resource. We want to make sure that we're being efficient, and we need to start collaborating around some of the shared services or the redundant services that are happening. So
Yeah,
I do
it's
think
it's
that
part
that's
of-
the
it's
avenue
part
that
of
I
the
would like.
Classroom, it could also be administration and
Yeah,
other kinds of things, okay?
some of the back end pieces, absolutely.
Well, and the flip side of that too, just in terms of, the dialogue is, I'd be remiss based on my participation in the cultural competency group
That's
is,
right.
would we want to deliberately invite diversity into the district in
Mhm.
some capacity? So that's another thought too. So it sounds like there's a need and an interest for the board to become a little more aware of F13,
Mhm.
but also to broaden the conversation to include a lot of the feedback that we've gotten during this discussion.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Great, thank you.
All right, set the agenda for the September 3rd meeting.
Okay, so a couple things here. Fundraising, again, it's not to be forgotten, but it will be put onto the second September meeting.
Put the student report on there.
And, yep, that's good.
And
Well,
you-
we're gonna, so as, under announcements, the student.
We usually put the student
Yes,
report right there.
yeah. And I should have had that there, we'll put it on there. And we are working, I'm working with Patrick to get a junior board rep.
Okay.
We have a senior board rep now, so
Mhm.
that's in the process.
I wondered, and I don't know if this would be on future agenda items or where it would fit in, but just kind of an update on where the performance evaluation piece
Yep, well, that's
is.
actually.
Having a meeting.
We're meeting, when are we meeting?
The third.
Wednesday. We're meeting that. Yeah, why don't we put that on there, since we're meeting that afternoon. We're meeting the afternoon of the 3rd
So we'll put
with
performance
Sarah Denny.
eval.
Also, could you put on for action resolutions? I need to report back, and I think we may need to take additional action with respect to the resolution that
Okay, I did print that out and I left it for.
we. Yeah, I have it. I'm
Get
gonna
it?
give it back to you to give back to us in our board
That's
package.
right.
It
Okay,
should be in the board
perfect.
package.
Which resolution is this
The
one?
resolution that we voted on last time.
Not the big picture?
The big picture one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to report back to you folks on what the resolution committee of the VSBA
No,
was. Yeah.
Okay.
And we may need to take an additional vote on whether we're gonna proceed.
And I think,
With that
isn't
resolution.
treatment of staff, you want to keep that here, that's 2.2?
That's what we just did.
Treatment of staff,
Yeah,
which
it's
we'll bring
2.2.
back.
Yeah, I think
Because
the
I'm gonna have
number is
on
just
there.
wrong on that.
Yeah, it's 2-2.
It should be two. Yeah. And financial conditions and activities, actually, as I said, that will come in September. I'm going to remove that based on some workload distribution on that's in front of John right now.
David,
Yep.
but I do want to say that you wouldn't be getting it the Friday before, you'd be getting it the Monday before.
The second meeting?
Yes. So we're almost there, but it's, you'd have a lot of time to look at. So I'm
Okay.
making that point.
Sorry. And then, David, I wanted clarity on teacher staff evaluations, including SMART goals.
Right.
Because we don't require SMART goals as part of the teacher evaluation, and in
Mhm.
fact, the state is no longer going to be requiring SMART goals.
Well-
So we thought it might be more appropriate to tell you about the new state licensing procedures, which have changed over this summer, and have Annie Cooper come with me and do that at the next meeting.
Great.
And then after that, and after the Sarah Denny report, have a clearer discussion about where you want to go in terms of questions of evaluation.
Okay.
So the real proper would be teacher relicensing and
The student report, performance
Procedures.
evaluation, resolution, removing fundraising and putting it on the next one, and 2.4. 2.2 is corrected and on there. I probably will bring back, but probably in my report will be an enrollment update, just an enrollment and kind of status update. Okay?
Yeah. All right,
Thank you.
future agenda items. Anything we haven't covered?
I got a whole host of them I want to add.
Oh, talk to Diane.
Make it snack.
Go ahead.
Based on the discussion earlier, actually, I would propose that we look at some of the individual things from the educational quality standards that were laid out here. Like, I'd love to hear more about flexible pathways, the personalized learning plans. I know we've heard some, but I think that we need to kind of, yeah, I don't know, I think we probably, curriculum is already covered. Graduation requirements, we haven't heard about those lately.
Yeah, it'd be good to, because there was weren't they doing some work at Castleton this summer on the proficiency grade?
Yeah,
It'd be
just
nice
getting
to
an
have
update on
Yeah.
several of these things. The professional development bit on 21.2. And the continuous improvement plan. I know what we're gonna be seeing it, but I just have it on the future agenda.
Yeah, that's
And the other one that I would add is that we haven't.
Jeez. I'm
He's
sorry
gonna go
about
on
it.
You said that out loud.
Yeah, a little internal control there. As we are getting to the point where we're finally going to understand a little bit more about the performance evaluation of teachers, I think we should be talking about doing the same thing for your evaluations that you do of administration. Because I don't know that I really understand that process very well.
They're getting some information on that.
Yeah, so I would put that in the future agenda item so we can not lose track of those.
So can I ask a question? To what extent is this action we're going to have on treatment of staff encompass the survey results being used?
Oh, that's a good question, yeah.
We have a
We have-
future item called our survey results. We just had a discussion here back about our survey results being used. Is this the
Well, I
same,
think
is this the same thing?
It could count for that, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of different surveys. They all may not be specific to how people are feeling the organizational climate is, right? It could be, a variety of other collections of information, right? I mean,
But I think your point is right. I think
they're most
you
of
could
them.
give us an example of how you use the staff one
to collect.
to pursue the vision of the organization or whatever. You know what I think that's.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that, at least I'd like to feel that surveys are more than just an activity.
Right.
They produce some
They're
kind
not
of
just
action and results.
an activity that
And
happens.
if they can't do that, that we consciously just say, okay, that was a nice survey, we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
So, clarity on future agenda items, because there's like the future agenda items, like the airport, that kind of like sit on this list.
Yeah, they shouldn't sit on the list, but yeah.
Right. Well, but there are things like Martin just asked, really, that should be put just into the calendar. Because all those things are things we plan to report on you about, like personal learning plans, all that. That's just.
Well,
It's on here until we get it on the calendar.
Right, so I just.
But what we need to do, Stuart, and that may be true, is under our monitoring work, we either, where is that included, right? Could be embedded in curricular-related work where we're going to be updating about the curriculum and personalized learning plans. It could be there, or we may do just a one-off report that provides, because again, some of these are new and we're working. What is the requirement call for? That may be helpful information to the board as we, work to implement that. So,
I mean, a good outcome, I think, if you're in a position to do it, would be to download the items Martin just covered into the calendar.
that's right.
And
But
if we
some of
get
them,
that-
may be embedded in, curriculum development and review, perhaps,
and just
right?
call them out.
Right. So we'll work on it. It's good.
Anything else on future agenda items?
You doing all right, Diane?
Yeah,
With all those
I'm
future
fine.
agenda items?
Boy, I have a reputation.
We just
It's
put
all
you into
good.
shock with that
Yeah, you're
list.
helping us to get them out.
All right, we'll move on to the minutes of the July 30th meeting.
I have one change in the feedback on form-based code. It says that I had a conversation with Attorney Steve Stitzel. It was actually Sean Tooley. Other than that, I didn't have anything.
That's on page,
Page
It's on the
3,
three,
I think. Page
three.
Did
Under
you?
feedback
are you
on
getting that, Meg?
form-based code.
Okay.
okay, so with that change, by consensus, those minutes are approved. We'll move on to the minutes of August 20th. And seeing no objection, those are approved. And we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have a new hire. Do you want to?
Sure. Gwen Patterson, female, special education teacher at Chamberlain. We're really happy to have her. This is a 1 year only. It's a hire after the fact. And this is a result of the board's approval of the leave request. And we're really happy to have her. She's very skilled and is, I think, going to bring great skills to Chamberlain. So.
Great. So do I have a motion to approve the new hire?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on AP orders 5, 6, 7, or 8? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the AP check to Teamcraft Roofing.
And this is the roofing that, and John can go into more detail if you have questions, but it's around this is the high school roof project. And obviously, as it states in the bracketed parentheses, it exceeds $50,000. It requires your approval.
And John, what was the budget for this?
Well, we had 158,000 the total of the cost.
So it's coming in under budget?
No, this is 3/4. It's coming in right on.
It's not the total.
It's not the total. This is the first 3/4. The job is done now. It's all documented. It's actually the best thing, best roof I've ever seen. It really is. The asbestos abatement is all documented. The workers, we have a pictorial of the whole thing, step by step.
I think the roof technology, not that some of you are really interested in roof technology, but the methodology used in this flat roof.
This is consistent with the terms we have
great.
for the contract?
Oh, yeah, it's right on. There's no problem with that.
I could take pictures for you.
So do I have a motion to approve the expense or the AP check to Teamcraft Roofing in the amount of $119,247?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
You know why I'm so excited about the best roof I know? Because it's done.
Well, and how many
We've
years,
talked about
John?
some other projects you see that.
And what's the warranty on it?
What's that?
What's
30
the-
years.
Yeah. Smart.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, we have a board self-evaluation to do, so we'll take a few minutes and complete that.
You got a roll call.
I delivered
do.
it to you, along with a
It went from
thing to sign.
allergies to
You
a
and John
cold.
are kind of the same.
Yeah, I talked to him the other day.
You're welcome. There's a long walk over there.
All right. Reporting out. With respect to the school board meeting component of the evaluation, the only thing we have is agenda items being prioritized and moved from the parking lot to future meeting dates, sort of. We have one sort of, the rest of them are agrees. Sort of agree, I think it is. And we also have a comment that we had good communication on the window glazing. I agree, and with respect to the school board meeting component, the superintendent feedback component, We have all agrees, actually, on that. No complaints today. So there you go.
And did we want to give it out to our audience to?
I don't know if Corey wants to comment on it.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because we've done that in the past.
Corey hasn't commented yet. She comments in the paper the next week.
I just want to leave it open as an option, because we talked about kind of getting feedback
We should be doing that,
Yeah.
From-
No, yeah, but, yeah.
I don't know if
Oh, you
Stuart
mean
and
from
Corey-
the audience, the TV audience?
TV audience.
Well,
The YouTube audience.
Every
audience, yes,
audience
of
that
course.
might be out there,
Right.
but just
Right,
providing the
right.
opportunity, because
Well, we're
I
gonna
think
do
it helps
some-
us
yeah.
grow.
And we're gonna
Were
look
we gonna do
into,
something on, I thought we were gonna put this on,
I thought
We're
we were
gonna
gonna try to
look
post
into-
it.
I think
The
like a
post-it,
little thing,
David.
yeah, that you could.
Sure, where we're at. I don't know if we have done that or not, but
Let's see
kind
if
of
we
the
can
feedback
post it.
form, post the feedback form.
and I think at the end of your article, you should have like a 5-star rating system, 1 to 5. That'd be
go on
How'd we do?
Yelp or TripAdvisor or something like
Yes,
that.
and then you could have, people on their cell phones,
Now that
send
you
in
brought it
like
up, we're
a-
gonna
Right.
end up with like the Rotten Tomato kind of approach. All right, unless there's any other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
And we are adjourned.